Okay, you know, there's been a lot of theories about COVID-19, haven't there? Did it start with a bat? Did it start in a lab? Did it start in America and it somehow snuck into China? None of that really matters. What matters is, I think we can all appreciate that our lives have changed exponentially. I mean, who would have thought that in 2019, when we were recovering from the bushfires in Australia, that we would be in the situation that we're in today? You know, we've had very, very little time to prepare for this crisis, but I believe that there are lessons that we can learn from this crisis. I'm going to go through a little bit of COVID-19 so far, just so we can remember where we've been, because it has been a roller coaster. So in December 2019, if you remember, there was a mysterious pneumonia-like cluster that began in that famous city of Wuhan in China. And then it grew exponentially around the entire world. By the time we hit March, Italy, Iran, South Korea and Japan reported surging numbers of cases. And by the end of March, these cases the cases outside China in these countries had far surpassed the amount of cases that were inside China. Back home in Australia, we were reassured by our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, that we could go about our daily business, and that he envisaged us still going to places of mass gatherings such as the football. But we didn't really listen, did we? We started panic buying. We started preparing, didn't we? By the second half of March, things then very, very quickly accelerated into a full shutdown. We had border travel bans, testing, quarantining, and that's sort of where we are now. Now, I want you to have a brief sort of think about how you prepared for this crisis. How did I prepare in my home? Well, I remember driving home from work one day and seeing this article in the Sydney Morning Herald saying how to prepare for a pandemic. And this article said you needed 2 weeks worth of food, 2 weeks worth of medication, 2 weeks worth of supplies. So on the way home, I was in a bit of a panic. I started actually buying a lot of things, and this is way before people started panic buying. I just thought I wanted to be prepared. I started making sure that people I cared for had enough medication and food and things at home, because we just didn't know what was going to happen in the world. This is pretty much what happened in my household. That's my linen cupboard with all the toilet rolls. And if a lot of you remember, the Prime Minister said to us, you know, essential travel, you can go outside and you can buy things to entertain yourself, and we didn't know how long we were going to be at home. So I have 2 young children, as you all know, so we bought a whole bunch of jigsaw puzzles. They're still sitting there, big stack of them that we haven't finished half of. Another thing is, I remember that during the lockdown, part of essential travel was exercise, but as far as I know, they never really defined how far exercise was. So every time we wanted to just get away from the madness, we wanted to get away from the whole COVID-19 crisis and disappear into the bush, we used to always wear our gym gear. In case we got pulled over by the police, we could say we were just going to get exercise. You know, on the work front, we also had to prepare for the worst. We went into split teams. For a lot of you probably already know, but I work in local pharmacy. So if we didn't split our teams up, what would happen is if someone caught COVID-19, the whole pharmacy would have to shut down for a week. And that means that no one in the area would get their medication. So we went into split teams. We also had to make sure that all the surfaces in the pharmacy were all sanitized between the teams to minimize transmission. Another thing I just want to mention too is that we made it very strict that these teams were not allowed to have any physical contact outside of work. So we prepared as best we could. But you know, there's something that we didn't prepare for. We recently recombined the teams as we realised that the transmission in the community was relatively low compared to other parts of Australia. So we recombined our teams and we had a sort of coming together party to celebrate us reuniting as a group. And 2 of my staff members, so one of them was on each team, when they saw each other, they just broke down in tears and started to cry. And it's things like that that you just don't prepare for. And speaking about being prepared, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of you have reminisced as I've gone through my experience of the things that you've experienced in the last few months and the adjustments that you've had to make. But, speaking about preparation, there is a lot of preparation that's been going on inside our minds, hasn't there? A lot of preparation, a lot of thoughts about where this world is headed and where we are going. So I'd like to take a minute now to go through, where is the world headed? So where are we in time according to the Bible? Well, a lot of us already know this, but one of the clearest indications of where we are in the Bible, one of the easiest to understand, is the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2. Now, Daniel interprets a prophetic dream given to the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. This dream spans from Daniel's time to the end of the world's history. So we have a huge statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and feet of iron and clay. Now, Daniel interprets this dream for the king of Babylon, and he's given this divine interpretation from God, and he tells him that he is the head of gold. He says to King Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold, and then after you will come another kingdom, and another, and another, and another. And those of us who are honest seekers, actually any honest seeker of truth with a knowledge of history, can verify that after Babylon fell, there was Medo-Persia. After Medo-Persia fell, there was Greece. After Greece fell, there was Rome. And after Rome disintegrated, there were the nations of modern Europe. So we can clearly see where we are in the history of the world. Now, what happens next? We're told in the story that there is a stone cut out without hands, and it strikes the feet of iron and clay. This stone destroys the entire statue and becomes a great mountain and fills the entire earth. So we know that something is going to happen in the time in which we are living. And we're living at the very bottom of the statue. I think everyone would agree with that. So let's just have a read at what the interpretation is. Daniel chapter 2, verse 44. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Amen. So it is abundantly clear, and we're told from the Bible, that in our lifetime, in the time in which we are living, Jesus will come back to the earth, and this whole statue will fall, and we will have reached the end of time. Remember, I'm speaking about preparation. So how do we prepare? Let's turn to Matthew chapter 24 and verse 4. Matthew chapter 24, verse 4. We're going to spend a little bit of time here because Jesus tells us what to look out for. In verse 4, he says, "Take heed that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." So Jesus gives us signs, right? We can all agree that these are signs. There will be religious deception, wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, or ethnicity against ethnicity. We've seen a bit of that happening in the United States. There have been famines, pestilences, and earthquakes. And verse 8 tells us that these things are the beginning of sorrows. And we know from other interpretations and other versions of this story, it's also referred to as birth pains. So we know that as we get closer towards the end of time, like birth pains, all these things will increase in intensity. They'll increase in frequency. And if you haven't noticed, that's what's been happening now in the world. I'd like to ask ourselves a question. How long was it between the bushfires, the global pandemic that we're in now, the blast in Lebanon, the Black Lives Matter civil unrest, and now the second wave hitting Europe? Would you say it's around a year? All within the space of a year, or just over a year, or just under a year. It's quite shocking. So, we know how close we are living to the end of time. Furthermore, if we go to verse 32, we're told by Jesus, "Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." And then we go to verse 36, and 36 onwards, and we're told that no one knows the day or the hour. So we're given signs. We're told that the signs will increase in frequency. We're given, again, the parable of the fig tree, which tells us, look, even when the seasons change, even you can see it in nature, when leaves start to fall off the trees and fruits start to change, you can tell. So it's reinforced to us that we must look at the signs, right? And then we're told again that no one knows the day or the hour. So again, look for the signs, because we're not given any time when Jesus will come. But here's the thing. Here is the point I'd like to make. I think that we are fantastic at interpreting the signs and seeing the signs and preaching the signs and telling our friends and family, the world's getting worse. Jesus is going to come back. We're good at looking at prophetic end time scenarios and who the players are and what the Bible tells us about them. But here's the thing. Watching for the signs is not the same as preparing. Only watching for the signs will not prepare us for the end. I believe that the signs were given to us to tell us how much preparation time we have left. So after quite a long discourse here in Matthew, right in the middle of this, we have the parable of the wise and the foolish virgins. Now I believe that this parable is all about preparation. Now if you want to follow on with me, Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. So it should just be the next page or next page or two. "Then the kingdom of heaven shall be likened to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Now 5 of them were wise and 5 were foolish. Those who were foolish took their lamps and took no oil in them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. But while the bridegroom was delayed, they all slumbered and slept. And at midnight a cry was heard, 'Behold, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him.' Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'No, lest there should not be enough for us and you, but go rather to those who sell and buy for yourselves.' And while they went to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went out with him to the wedding, and the door was shut." I'm sure a lot of us have heard this parable, but I'm just going to quickly revise what the parable is about. So we have 10 virgins, and we know from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 2, it says, "For I'm jealous for you with a godly jealousy, for I have betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." So the 10 virgins represent God's pure church. There are many other verses that can verify this as well. The lamp represents the word of God. We know your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And what does a lamp give? It gives light, right? Light in the Bible can also represent prophecy. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 19. "And so we have the prophetic word confirmed, that you do well to heed as a light which shines in a dark place." And the oil we know from Zechariah chapter 4, Zerubbabel sees an image of 2 olive trees dripping oil into a bowl and then into lamps. And the angel explains to Zerubbabel, "Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit." So what's the interpretation? What is the application of this of this parable. So the virgins represent God's end-time church. They eat differently, they dress differently, they have a different form of entertainment. They also have lamps. They've studied the Bible earnestly. They know where they are in the earth's history. They know the prophecies of Daniel, Revelation. They have doctrines that are rooted and grounded in the Bible, such as the Sabbath, the state of the dead, the sanctuary, etc. They have light. They are a prophetic movement. Perhaps they have the spirit of prophecy. And they are living in the end of time. They are expecting the bridegroom to come, which is Jesus. They are expecting him to come in their lifetime. You know, perhaps the word Adventist might describe them. So a lot of you can explain this probably a lot better than I can, but you know, when I look at this parable of the 10 virgins, there's one thing that I can't understand. Why is the entire church asleep? They have the prophetic light. They have the correct interpretation of the Bible. And amidst that, they have the signs, right? They know that there's going to be wars, there's going to be rumors of wars, there's going to be famines, pestilences, earthquakes, and all of these things are going to be increasing in frequency. So why are they asleep? I've come up with my own theory about that. Have any of you ever seen a YouTube video of a Thai boxer kicking down a banana tree in under 3 minutes? It's quite brutal. So, see, rumour has it that in Thailand, it's just a rumour, in Thailand, the Thai boxers, when they're training, when they start out, they kick their shins against very, very hard objects, like the trunks of trees, maybe, you know, a wooden dummy, as you know, you've seen in certain martial arts. So they kick their shins against these hard objects. And at the beginning, the pain is really, really excruciating. They start to bleed and they start to have bruises. But after time, calluses build up and they can't really feel the bruises anymore. And you know, another thing happens to these Thai boxers. I'm sure that after when they hit the tree for the first time, mentally there's a lot of shock. But after a while, they become stronger mentally and they begin to push through the pain. And after a while, they can't really feel the pain anymore. You know, the human body is incredible. We can adapt to not just physical changes, but mental changes. And I just want to ask you this question. Could it be that we've been through 9/11, the global financial crisis, the pandemic that we're in now, we've been through fires, floods, all of these horrible things that have happened, and then perhaps we've become a little bit desensitized to the times in which we're living. You know, before lockdown, I was quite, how could you say it, I was in a nervous expectation, I guess, that something big was going to happen. Everything was closing. During the lockdown, I was quite worried that, you know, we were getting closer to the end of time. But now, the shopping centres are open. Schools are open. I'm just talking about in New South Wales in Australia. I know things are different in the other parts of the world, but, you know, things are starting to open up. And this is our first Sabbath back at church. So, you know, we have to ask ourselves, do we still feel the same way as we did when the lockdowns began? See, I think that, yeah, it might be yes for some of us. And equally, I think it might be maybe no for the rest of us, but we just don't know. You know, my point is, the 10 virgins perhaps fell asleep while they were watching for the signs. Perhaps they grew a little bit numb to the signs. So watching for the signs doesn't equal preparation, because all the 10 virgins were asleep when the midnight cry came. So I guess the only question is now, what makes the wise wise? Have you ever fallen asleep while studying for a test? You know, you cram the night before, you study, you just get so tired of studying and you just fall asleep. And then the next morning, the alarm goes off and you're probably still drowsy, but you wake up and you're prepared because you know that you've studied. But what happens when you haven't studied for the test? You wake up the next morning, the alarm goes off, and you know that you're not ready. It is not wise to not study for an exam. So what makes the wise wise? You know, wisdom is defined in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So we know that the wise virgins are wise. But by implication, we know here from this verse that wisdom has a beginning. It's obtained over time. The 10 virgins have an experience that they have cultivated over time. And of course, we know that the virgins have oil, and the oil represents the Holy Spirit. We also know that the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And does fruit grow overnight? It doesn't. Fruit takes time. If we put it simply, the wise virgins have feared God from the beginning. They have learnt to trust Him over time, and they have the good fruit of the Holy Spirit in their lives, so that when the test comes, when the calamity, the final calamity hits, they are totally prepared. Has COVID-19 brought you into a closer experience with God? You know, the reason why I told you so much about my workplace in the last 6 months being on split teams, I have been very, very stressed out at work. Very, very stressed out. We're serving, being a pharmacy, you know, we're lucky that we're one of the few businesses that's still trading and operating during that whole period. But, you know, we were serving roughly the same amount of customers with half the amount of staff. And I'm sure a lot of you have issues like that in your own work as well. And I really, really hesitate to think of what the customers and what the staff, when they looked at my face, what they really thought about me during that time, because all they would have seen was anxiety and fear on my face. You know, I came up very, very short. It is in a crisis that character is revealed. A sudden and unlooked for calamity, something that brings the soul face to face with death, will show whether there is any real faith in the promises of God. It will show whether the soul is sustained by grace. You know, the wise virgins, under pressure, under stress, they have a peace that surpasses all understanding. They have a face that is anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, they have let their requests be made known to God. They have counted it joy when they have fallen into various trials, knowing that their faith is being tested. How has your faith been during this crisis? How has your faith been during sickness? When the day doesn't go the way that you hope it to, when your car breaks down, how has your faith been? If we cannot trust in God to get us through one day of work or a stressful situation or babysitting or whatever it is you do every single day, how are we going to trust God when there comes a time when we cannot buy or sell? You know, the correct preparation, I believe, for the end of time is to trust God. Trust Him in the little things. We all need to do this. Trust Him in the little things, because when that great test comes, when whatever the world looks like tomorrow, we will all be ready.